Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast, the weekly Torah portion podcast where I read the weekly Torah portion and then provide my own interpretation of what I think it all means. As always, I remind everybody I'm not a professional Torah scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the Torah. This week's Torah portion is actually a double portion, Matot and Massei, Matot-Massei. Matot meaning tribes, and Massei meaning journey. You could follow along in English on Chabad.org, starting with chapter 30 in the book of Numbers, verse number 2, all the way through chapter 36, verse 13. Now beginning for the Shabbat on the 28th of Tammuz, 5784, August 3rd, 2024. First portion, chapter 30, verse 2 of Bamidbar. Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the thing the Lord has commanded. If a man makes a vow to the Lord, or makes an oath to prohibit himself, he shall not violate his word. According to whatever came out of his mouth he shall do. If a woman makes a vow to the Lord, or imposes a prohibition upon herself while in her father's house, in her youth, if her father heard her vow or her prohibition which she has prohibited upon herself, yet her father remains silent, all her vows shall stand, and any prohibition that she has imposed upon herself shall stand. But if her father hinders her on the day he hears it, all her vows and her prohibitions that she has imposed upon herself shall not stand. The Lord will forgive her, because her father hindered her. But if she is betrothed to a man, with her vows upon her, or by an utterance of her lips which she has imposed upon herself, and her husband hears it, but remains silent on the day he hears it, her vows shall stand, and her prohibition which she has imposed upon herself shall stand. But if her husband hinders her on the day he heard it, he has revoked the vow she had taken upon herself, and the utterance which she had imposed upon herself, and the Lord will forgive her. As for the vow of a widow or a divorced woman, whatever she prohibited upon herself will remain upon her. But if she vowed in her husband's house, or imposed a prohibition upon herself with an oath, and her husband heard and remained silent, and did not hinder her, all her vows shall stand, and every prohibition she imposed upon herself shall stand. If her husband revokes them on the day he hears them, anything issuing from her lips regarding her vows or self-imposed prohibitions shall not stand. Her husband has revoked them, and the Lord shall forgive her. Any vow or any binding oath of self-affliction, her husband can either uphold it or revoke it. However, if her husband remains silent from day to day, he has upheld all the vows and prohibitions she has assumed. He has upheld them since he remained silent on the day he heard it. If he revokes them, having heard them, he shall bear her iniquity. These are the statutes which the Lord commanded Moses concerning a man and his wife, a father and his daughter, in her youth, while in her father's house. Chapter 31, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take revenge for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterwards you will be gathered to your people." So Moses spoke to the people, saying, "Arm from among you men for the army, that they can be against Midian, and carry out the revenge of the Lord against Midian. 1,000 for each tribe. 1,000 for each tribe from all the tribes of Israel you shall send into the army." From the thousands of Israel, 1,000 was given over for each tribe, 12,000 armed for battle. Moses sent them the 1,000 from each tribe to the army, them along with Phinehas the son of Eleazar the Kohen to the army, with sacred utensils and the trumpets for sounding in his possession. They mounted an attack against Midian, as the Lord had commanded Moses, and they killed every male. And they killed the Midianite kings upon their slain, Evi, Rakim, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. And Balaam, the son of Beor, they slew with the sword. The children of Israel took the Midianite women and their small children captive, and they plundered all their beasts, livestock, and all their possessions. They set fire to all their residential cities and their castles. They took all the booty and all the plunder of man and beast. They brought the captives, the plunder, and the booty to Moses and to Eleazar the Kohen, and to the entire community of Israel in the camp, in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. Thus concludes the first portion. So, a quick summary. The first section here, which is for chapter 30, verse 2 until the end of the chapter, specifically covers the situation when somebody makes a vow or an oath to the Lord. So men, when they say, they swear to do something or they vow to do something before God, they are bound to do it. So this is where the sin of a broken oath may come into place and would require a formal offering, though it's ideally not going to be that you make an oath that you'll break in the first place. But what's interesting here is that there's a totally different set of rules for women. So women can actually be absolved of the oaths and vows they make by the men in their family. So if it's their father that they live with, their father can hear it and say, no, 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 she is not responsible for that. I revoke it. Or if she's married, the man with his authority can hear her and say, no, 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 my wife is not responsible for that. I revoke her vow that she has made. And also the widow, right, or divorced woman, right? So if she makes the vow and her husband is no longer there, she's responsible for what gets said. But in the case of she says it and then the husband hears it and he says nothing, well, one, she is now stuck with it. But two, if later she's made this vow and, a couple days later the husband goes, you know what? I revoke what she said. She doesn't have to do it anymore. Her sin now falls onto his shoulders. So this is a very important precedent for who is held accountable. Ultimately, men are responsible for the things that they vow to do. Women can be absolved by the men in their lives, but if they don't absolve the woman of it the day it happens and they do it later, then the sin is on the man for having done it late. Now, the next portion, we have the Midianites, or I should say the next chapter, chapter 31. He gathers 1,000 from each tribe, so we can assume we have 12,000, and they go in and they basically conquer Midian. They kill all the kings, and they also take the life of Balaam, the guy who was the prophet that could speak with God, that was helping Balak. Well, now we know this is how he meets his end. He is killed during this conquest. The Midianites are taken as plunder, and they destroy their homes. They take all of the treasures. They bring it all to back to camp, basically. In the plains of Moab, this is what became of the Midianites. The men were killed, and everything else was taken as treasure. So the women, the children, the cattle, and so on. Now we go into the second portion, chapter 31, verse 13 of Numbers. Moses, Eleazar the Cohen, and all princes of the community went out to meet them outside the camp. Moses became angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands and the commanders of hundreds, who had returned from the campaign of war. Moses said to them, "Did you allow all the females to live? They were the same ones who were involved with the children of Israel on Balaam's advice to betray the Lord over the incident of Peor, resulting in a plague among the congregation of the Lord. So now kill every male child, and every woman who can lie intimately with a man you shall kill. And all the young girls who have no experience of intimate relations with a man, you may keep alive for yourselves. And you, encamp outside the camp for 7 days. Whoever killed a person or who touched a corpse shall cleanse himself on the 3rd and 7th day, both you and your captives. All garments, leather articles, any goat product, and every wooden article shall undergo purification." Eleazar the Cohen said to the soldiers returning from battle, "This is the statute that Lord commanded Moses. Only the gold, the silver, the copper, the iron, the tin, and the lead, whatever is used in fire, you shall pass through fire, and then it will be clean. It must, however, also be cleansed with sprinkling water, and whatever is not used in fire, you shall pass through water. You shall wash your garments on the 7th day and become ritually clean. Afterwards, you may enter the camp." The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take count of the plunder of the captive people and animals, you together with Eleazar the Cohen and the paternal leaders of the community, and you shall divide the plunder equally between the warriors who went out to battle and the entire congregation. And you shall levy a tax for the Lord from the soldiers who went out to battle, 1 soul out of every 500 from the people, from the cattle, from the donkeys, and from the sheep. You shall take from their half and give it to Eleazar the Cohen as a gift to the Lord. From the half belonging to the children of Israel you shall take 1 part out of 50 of the people, of the cattle, of the donkeys, of the sheep, and of all the animals, and you shall give them to the Levites, the guardians of the Mishkan of the Lord." Moses and Eleazar the Cohen did as the Lord commanded Moses. The plunder, which was in addition to the spoils that the army had spoiled, consisted of 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys. As for the people, of the women who had no experience of intimate relations with a man, all souls were 32,000. The half that was the portion of these who went out to battle, the number of sheep was 337,500. The tax to the Lord from the sheep was 675. 36,000 cattle, of which the tax to the Lord was 72. 30,500 donkeys, of which the tax to the Lord was 61. 16,000 people, of which the tax to the Lord was 32 people. Moses gave the tax, which was the gift to the Lord, to Eleazar the Cohen, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And from the half allotted to the children of Israel, which Moses had divided from the men who had gone into the army, the community's half consisted of 337,500 sheep, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. Moses took one part out of 50 from the half of the children of Israel, and the people and the animals, and gave them to the Levites, the guardian of the Lord's sanctuary, as God commanded Moses. The officers appointed over the army's thousands, the commander of thousands and the commander of hundreds, approached Moses. They said to Moses, "Your servants counted the soldiers who were in our charge, and not one man was missing from us. We therefore wish to bring an offering for the Lord. Any man who found a gold article, be it an anklet, bracelet, a ring, an earring, or a body ornament, to atone for our souls before the Lord." Moses and Eleazar the Cohen took all the gold articles from them. The total of the gift of gold which they dedicated to the Lord amounted to 16,750 shekels. This was from the commanders of the thousands and the commanders of the hundreds. The soldiers had seized spoil for themselves. Moses and Eleazar took the gold from the commanders of the thousands and hundreds and brought it to the tent of meeting as a remembrance for the children of Israel before the Lord. All right. That is the end of the second portion. So let's try to recap. So they bring back all of the plunder, and Moses and Eleazar see it, and Moses gets very mad, and he asks them, "Did you allow all of the females to live? These are the same women who were responsible for that thing that just happened recently where we had a plague killing our people. You've got to get rid of them. They can't be allowed to live. They're a problem. So kill every male child and every woman who can lie intimately with a man." So basically, other than that, the only ones who are allowed to live are the young virgin girls who have no knowledge of intimate matters. They're innocent young girls, basically. The sons, they all die. The women who are old enough to have been involved, they also die. So just the young girls are kept alive. And everybody involved has to get out of the camp and purify themselves. And then also the things that they got from this, according to Eleazar, the items that can go through fire need to be cleansed in fire, right? And then once they've been cleansed, it can then be used elsewise. Also, you got to clean your clothing. And then from here, they take account of all the items. God tells them to do equal division of the spoils to all of those who did battle and who were part of the congregation as a whole. And they're going to be taxed. So for every 1 out of every 500 is going to go to the soldiers. And then also from their portion, they're going to take the offering that goes to Eleazar the Cohen as a gift to the Lord. Then from the half belonging to all the children of Israel, take 1 out of every 50. So in the case of the soldiers, it's 1 out of 500. In the half that goes to the whole congregation, it's 1 in every 50. And these shall be given to the Levites, right? So whereas Eleazar receives 1 out of 500, the Levites as a whole receive 1 out of 50 from the half that goes to the whole congregation. And so they obey. And from here, we get a breakdown of how much everything actually was, like an itemized list. So this is how many sheep there were. This is how many people there were, right? And so the young girls that were innocent, they had 32,000 of them. And so basically what's going to become of them is that they will become the property of their conquerors. So they're going to be distributed accordingly. And I can only assume that they're going to become slaves, basically. Though it's also possible, according to a previous portion we read, I believe, if not a later portion, but I think it already happened. They'll if they like a woman that they've taken as part of the battle, they can marry her and go through that whole process. I don't know if we've already covered that or not, but that is something that can happen here. So this would be a relevant example. So now we finished breaking it down. We're also going to see that among the soldiers come and their officers come in and they say, you counted all of us and you saw none of us were missing from the army. Therefore, we want to bring an offering for the Lord. Any man who found something of value, of gold, we want to bring that to atone for our souls. And so Moses and Eleazar do so. They take the gold, and it says it's 16,750 shekels worth of gold that are used to atone for their souls. And so from here, they take it and they bring it to the tent of meeting as a remembrance for the children of Israel before the Lord. Now on to the third portion, chapter 32, verse 1 of Bamidbar. The descendants of Reuben and Gad had an abundance of livestock, very numerous, and they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. The descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben came, and they spoke to Moses and to Eleazar the Cohen, and to the princes of the community, saying, Ataroth Dibon Jazer and Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeh, Sebam, Nebo, and Beon. The land that the Lord struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. They said, If it pleases you, let this land be given to your servants as a heritage. Do not take us across the Jordan. Thereupon Moses said to the descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben, Shall your brethren go to war while you stay here? Why do you discourage the children of Israel from crossing over to the land which the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. They went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, and they discouraged the children of Israel from crossing into the land which the Lord has given them. The anger of the Lord flared that day, and he swore, saying, None of the men from the age of 20 and over who came out of Egypt will see the land that I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, for they did not follow me wholeheartedly, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, and Joshua the son of Nun, for they followed the Lord wholeheartedly. The anger of the Lord flared against Israel, and he made them wander in the desert for 40 years until the entire generation who had done evil in the eyes of the Lord had died out. And behold, you have now risen in place of your fathers as a society of sinful people, to add to the wrathful anger of the Lord against Israel. If you turn away from following him, he will leave you in the desert again, and you will destroy this entire people. They approached him and said, We will build sheepfolds for our livestock here, and cities for our children. We will then arm ourselves quickly and go before the children of Israel until we have brought them to their place. Our children will reside in the fortified cities on account of the inhabitants of the land. We shall not return to our homes until each of the children of Israel has taken possession of his inheritance. For we will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on the east bank of the Jordan. Okay, so that's the end of the third portion. So first up, we get the breakdown once again from all of the different pieces here. Now they've got all this land in front of them, and Gad and Reuben's descendants say, well, look at all this land. We have a ton of livestock, right? We have all these livestock, sheep, herding, cattle. We have all these animals, and look at this land. On this side of the Jordan is just perfect for livestock. So they go and they say, Moses, we would like to use this land as our inheritance. We would like to receive this land so that we can raise our livestock here. And Moses gets mad. He gets mad and he says, your fathers, they screwed this up the first time because I told them to go into the land and they came back saying that they didn't want it and it was no good. And now you're doing the same thing. You're saying you want this land instead of the land that we've been promised. So what you're doing here, you're going to piss off God, and it's going to cause the whole people to suffer. So can you explain that to me? What are you doing? And they say, oh, no, we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to leave our children and our livestock here and let them start building some cities. But then our soldiers, our men, will go into the land with the rest of the people and help them conquer it. And then after they've all received their inheritance, we'll go back to the land on the east side of the Jordan and proceed from there. We're just saying that we are going to continue helping, but we want to take this particular land because it'd be great for our livestock. So they basically say this is what they're going to do. They're claiming that they're not going to double cross the people. They're not going to abandon the people who need to go to war. They will fight as one. They're just saying we also would like to stay in this particular land because it's good for our cattle. So that's the end of the portion. Now moving on to the fourth portion, chapter 32, verse 20 of Bamidbar. Moses said to them, If you do this thing, if you arm yourselves for battle before the Lord, and your armed force crosses the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies before him, and the land will be conquered before the Lord, afterwards you may return, and you shall be freed of your obligation from the Lord and from Israel, and this land will become your heritage before the Lord. But if you do not do so, behold, you will have sinned against the Lord, and be aware of your sin which will find you. So build yourselves cities for your children, and enclosures for your sheep, and what has proceeded from your mouth you shall do. The descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben spoke to Moses, saying, Your servants will do as my master commands. Our children and our wives, our livestock and our cattle will remain there in the cities of Gilead. But your servants will cross over all who are armed for combat before the Lord, for the battle, as my master has spoken." Moses commanded Eleazar the Cohen and Joshua the son of Nun and all the paternal heads of the tribes of Israel concerning them. Moses said to them, "If the descendants of Gad and Reuben cross the Jordan with you armed for battle before the Lord, and the land is conquered before you, you shall give them the land of Gilead as a heritage. But if they do not cross over with you armed for battle, they shall receive a possession among you in the land of Canaan." The descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben answered, saying, "We shall do as the Lord has spoken to your servants. We shall cross over in an armed force before the Lord to the land of Canaan, and then we shall have the possession of our inheritance on this side of the Jordan." Moses gave the descendants of Gad and the descendants of Reuben and half the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the land together with its cities within borders, the cities surrounding territory. The descendants of Gad built Dibon, Atarot, and Aroer, and Atroth, Shofan, Jazer, and Jogbehah, and Beth Nimrah and Beth Haran, fortified cities and sheepfolds. The descendants of Reuben built Heshbon, Elialeh, and Kirjataim, and Nebo and Baal-Meon, their names having been changed, and Sibmah, and they were called with the names of the cities they built. The children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, went to Gilead and conquered it, driving out the Amorites who were there. Moses gave Gilead to Machir, the son of Manasseh, and he settled in it. Yair, the son of Manasseh, went and conquered their hamlets, and called them the hamlets of Yair. Novah went and conquered Kenat and its surrounding villages, and called it Nobach, after his name. Chapter 33, verse 1. These are the journeys of the children of Israel who left the land of Egypt in their legions under the charge of Moses and Aaron. Moses recorded their starting points for their journeys according to the word of the Lord, and these were their journeys with their starting points. They journeyed from Ramesses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the day following the Passover sacrifice. The children of Israel left triumphantly before the eyes of all the Egyptians. And the Egyptians were busy burying because the Lord had struck down their firstborn and had wrought vengeance against their deities. The children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses and camped in Sukkot. They journeyed from Sukkot and camped in Etam, at the edge of the desert. They journeyed from Etam and camped in Pi Hahirot, which faces Baal Zephon, and they camped in front of Migdol. They journeyed from Penei Hahirot and crossed in the midst of the sea to the desert. They walked for 3 days in the desert of Etam and camped in Marah. They journeyed from Marah and arrived in Elim, and in Elim there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there. They journeyed from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. They journeyed from the Red Sea and camped in the desert of Sin. They journeyed from the desert of Sin and camped in Dovka. They journeyed from Dovka and camped in Alush. They journeyed from Alush and camped in Rephidim, but there was not water for the people to drink. They journeyed from Rephidim and camped in the Sinai desert. They journeyed from the Sinai desert and camped in Kivrot Hatava. They journeyed from Kivrot Hatava and camped in Hazerot. They journeyed from Hazerot and camped in Ritmah. They journeyed from Ritmah and camped in Rimon Perez. They journeyed from Rimon Perez and camped in Libnah. They journeyed from Libnah and camped in Risa. They journeyed from Risa and camped in Kehelatah. They journeyed from Kehelatah and camped in Mount Shefer. They journeyed from Mount Shefer and camped in Haradah. They journeyed from Haradah and camped in Machelot. They journeyed from Machelot and camped in Tahat. They journeyed from Tahat and camped in Tarah. They journeyed from Tarah and camped in Mithka. They journeyed from Mithka and camped in Hashmonah. They journeyed from Hashmonah and camped in Moserot. They journeyed from Moserot and camped in Bnei Jakan. They journeyed from Bnei Jakan and camped in Hor Hagidad. They journeyed from Hor Hagidad and camped in Jolbatat. They journeyed from Jolbatat and camped in Avronah. They journeyed from Avronah and camped in Etzion Geber. They journeyed from Etzion Geber and camped in the desert of Zin, which is Kadesh. They journeyed from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor, at the edge of the land of Edom. Aaron the Cohen ascended Mount Hor at the Lord's bidding and died there, on the first day of the 5th month in the 40th year of the children of Israel's exodus from Egypt. Aaron was 123 years old when he died at Mount Hor. The Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelt in the south in the land of Canaan, heard that the children of Israel had arrived. They journeyed from Mount Hor and camped in Zalmonah. They journeyed from Zalmonah and camped in Punon. They journeyed from Punon and camped in Obot. They journeyed from Obot and camped at the ruins of Abarim on the Moabite boundary. They journeyed from the ruins and camped in Dibon Gad. They journeyed from Dibon Gad and camped in Almon Diblach Taimah. They journeyed from Almon Diblach Taimah and camped in the mountains of Abarim in front of Nebo. They journeyed from the mountains of Abarim and camped in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. They camped along the Jordan from Beth Jeshimot to Abel Shittim in the plains of Moab. Thus concludes the 4th portion. Quite a bit there. So, starting at the very beginning, as we rewind here, So at the start, they basically get the conclusion of the request to let the descendants of Gad and Reuben settle in the land east of the Jordan. And they agree that they're going to be allowed to do so long as they send their men of fighting capability to help conquer Israel, the land of Israel. And so they do so, and they say, we're going to do it. And Moses lets everybody know. He gathers all the people from all the tribes, all their leaders, as well as all of the different people that need to know this. Basically, he's making sure that everybody knows who's going to be able to hold them to this. Because remember, Moses has been told that his time is coming. He will be gathered to his people soon. So he's making sure that they all know what the official decree is here, so that after Moses is gone and they all go into the land, they're not going to forget the fact that this arrangement has been made. So they get the deal. You're going to be able to take those lands, and you could start building your cities in them, and we get a breakdown of which cities are created by these individuals. And also, some of the tribe of Manasseh are able to do just that. So with that, we get into the details of the entire journey. So all of chapter 33 that we covered here is basically up to verse 49. They are going to cover from A to B to B to C to C to D, every stop that they made along their journey with Moses through the desert, all of the locations that they traveled to. And we get a full breakdown of where they went in sequence, one after another. I'm not going to repeat all that. You can go ahead and review it, but that just gives you the breakdown of when and where. And of course, where Aaron died and so on. Interestingly, there's a note here that Aaron was 123 years old. Now, in the beginning of the Torah, we saw that man shall live to be no more than 120. So this is a very interesting thing, right? Early on, basically, God says, all right, no more of that. From here on out, nobody's going to live more than 120 years. Now, that could be literally 120. It could mean that about 120 years, approximation, right? But I do find that to be interesting. So Aaron was a very different person, right? A very special person, because he was the first of the Kohanim. So I think in this case, what we can assume, this is going to be my theory here. I'm going to treat it not as an approximation. I'm going to assume something different. Aaron was exempt from the rule because as the Kohen Gadol, as the first with the Kehunah and all this and all that, all the holiness that he had because of his amazing position and his own correspondence with the Lord, Aaron may very well have been immortal until he would pass it on to his successor. In other words, by passing his clothing and passing the blessing to his son, Aaron lost that which was keeping him alive. And therefore he died at the age of 123. So perhaps for this reason, had Aaron not been sentenced to die, he would have kept on living, right? And after all, that would have been the case for Moses as well. If they hadn't committed the sin that they did by not doing exactly as God had commanded, there was nothing saying that the two of them were going to have to die also. But unfortunately, the decree changed for them as soon as they failed to do exactly as God had said. So my theory there, normal human men are limited to 120 years. Aaron was not a normal human man. He was given an extra 3 years because of how holy he was, because of his position as the high priest. But once he had passed that on, it was as if the spiritual power that kept him alive extra years was gone from him and he died. That is my theory there. So now, going from here, we heard all of the locations. We now know about the Aaron thing. We can go ahead and move on to the fifth portion, starting with verse number 50 in chapter 33 of Bamidbar. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, destroy all their temples, destroy their molten idols, and demolish their high places. You shall clear out the land and settle in it, for I have given you the land to occupy it. You shall give the land as an inheritance to your families by lot. To the large you shall give a larger inheritance, and to the small you shall give a smaller inheritance. Wherever the lot falls shall be his, according to the tribes of your fathers you shall inherit. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then those whom you leave over will be as spikes in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they will harass you in the land in which you settle. and it will be that what I had intended to do to them, I will do to you. Chapter 34, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Command the children of Israel, and say to them, When you arrive in the land of Canaan, this is the land which shall fall to you as an inheritance, the land of Canaan according to its borders. Your southernmost corner shall be from the desert of Zin along Edom, and the southern border shall be from the edge of the Sea of Salt, the Dead Sea, to the east. The border then turns south of Ma'ale Akrabim, the elevation of Akrabim, passing towards Zin, and its ends shall be to the south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it shall extend to Hazar Adar, and continue toward Asmon. The border then turns from Asmon to the stream of Egypt, and its end shall be to the sea. The western border, it shall be for you the great Mediterranean Sea, and the border, this shall be your western border. This shall be your northern border. From the great Mediterranean Sea turn yourselves toward Mount Hor. From Mount Hor turn to the entrance of Hamat, and the ends of the border shall be toward Zedad. The border shall then extend to Ziphron, and its end shall be Hazar-Enan. This shall be your northern border. You shall then turn yourselves toward the eastern border, from Hazar-Enan to Shepham. The border descends from Stepham toward Riblah, to the east of Ain. Then the border descends and hits the eastern shore of Lake Kinneret. The border then continues down along the Jordan, and its ends is the Sea of Salt. This shall be your land according to its borders around. Moses commanded the children of Israel, saying, This is the land which you are to apportion for inheritance through lot, that the Lord has commanded to give to the 9.5 tribes. For the tribe of Reuben's descendants according to their father's house, and the tribe of Gad's descendants according to their father's house, and half the tribe of Manasseh have already received their inheritance. The 2.5 tribes have received their inheritance on this side of the Jordan, near Jericho in the east, toward the sunrise. All right, so that's the end of the 5th portion. So first and foremost, the Lord is telling them that when they drive out all the inhabitants, you're going to destroy their temples, their idols, all their high places. You're going to completely clear it out and settle in it. You're going to give the land to your families, right? So we're going to break it down by lots, and the amount that you receive is going to be based on the size of your families. So, for example, if the tribe of Judah represents the largest number of them, they're going to receive the largest total inheritance, right? So think of it like that. Basically, man for man, it's going to count who gets inheritance percentages based on the number of people. So if there's 100% of the land and 20% of the total population is from one tribe, then 20% of the population will receive on behalf of that tribe accordingly. So it's going to make sure it goes by actual by size, by need. So it's going to be distributed fairly according to the size of the people. The other thing here is they're being told very explicitly that you're going to clear out the land and settle in it. And anybody that you don't drive out, those who you leave behind will be as spikes in your eyes and thorns in your sides. So essentially that means don't leave any outsiders. When you take over, fully take over, because otherwise they're going to be a problem for you, and what I intended to do to them is going to happen to you. So you're going to be the one that gets driven out. So don't screw this up. Oh, another thing here is you're not going to get to be picky about what inheritance you get. It's going to be determined fairly by lots. So they're going to do it with a lottery system. Now, in the 34th chapter, they're being told when they arrive, it's going to once again be an inheritance, right? But it's going to be by these borders. So the exact border of the promised land is defined here in very clear terms. So here we have from one corner, the southernmost is the desert of Zin along Edom. And from there, it's going to be from the edge of the Dead Sea to the east. So that's a pretty clearly defined border. Then south of Ma'ale Akrabim, towards Zin, it ends south of Kadesh Barnea, then Hazar Adar, and toward Asmon, from Asmon to the stream of Egypt, and then it ends at the sea. The western border is going to be just the Mediterranean Sea, so that's pretty clear. And then the northern border is going to be from the Mediterranean Sea toward Mount Hor. From the entrance of Hamat, the ends of the border shall be toward Zedad. Then extend to Ziphron, and its end shall be Hazar-Enan. So there's the northern border clearly defined. And then the eastern border, Hazar-Enan to Shepham, that descends from Shepham toward Riblah to the east of Ain. The border descends and hits the eastern shore of Lake Kinneret, and then down along the Jordan, and its end is the Sea of Salt, the Dead Sea. So there you have the full border of the land of Israel. So I think this is kind of interesting. Most cultures, when you look at historical context, you look at conquering, what you define as your land. this is very interesting to me because unlike those other cultures who seem to have this idea of like manifest destiny, right? Like think about America. The entire continent was basically open for conquest, right? So the native population was they never stopped attacking. They never stopped pushing westward in manifest destiny. Here, it's clearly defined as, no, there's a set border. In other words, don't go any further than this. And I think that's really strange because most cultures would not have a very strictly defined border like this where they say, this is our border. We are not going for more land than just this. So the descendants of Reuben and Gad and Manasseh, half of Manasseh, they got their portion on the other side of the Jordan, but they don't share in that. But this is the clearly defined border. So I do think that's very interesting. And on one hand, this is I don't mean this to be a political statement, but it's very clear here that there can be no lingering outside peoples. This is supposed to explicitly be the land that belongs to the tribes. So, the idea of it being not followed to the T, right, is told very clearly. If you don't do as I say and drive them out, they're going to be a pest for you. They're going to be like thorns for you. And what was supposed to happen to them is going to happen to you. So a very interesting statement overall. And I think it really helps if you want to establish what is the definition of the promised land. We know exactly where the borders are. They are outlined perfectly in this particular text. And this is the holiest text for the entire people. So there's really no arguing one way or the other. This is what is defined as the promised land. And if you want to honor that, you have to take that particular land and fulfill it. Nonetheless, that was back then. At this point now, if we want to compare it to modern day, who are the tribes anyway? Who's from what tribe? It's very hard to tell because the lineages have been broken and lost to various challenges. All the same, we're going to go ahead and move on to the sixth portion. Now that we have concluded with those from Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh have already got their portion on the east side of the Jordan. All right, now let's go into sixth portion, chapter 34, verse 16. Bamidbar. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, These are the names of the men who shall inherit the land on your behalf, Eleazar the Cohen and Joshua the son of Nun. You shall take one chieftain from each tribe to help you to acquire the land. These are the names of the men. For the tribe of Judah, Caleb the son of Jephunneh. For the tribe of the descendants of Simeon, Samuel the son of Amihud. For the tribe of Benjamin, Elidad the son of Chizlon. The chieftain of the tribe of the descendants of Dan, Buki the son of Jogli. For the descendants of Joseph, the chieftain for the tribe of the descendants of Manasseh, Haniel the son of Ephod. The chieftain for the tribe of the descendants of Ephraim, Kemuel the son of Shiptan. The chieftain for the tribe of the descendants of Zebulun, Elizphan the son of Parnach. The chieftain for the tribe of the descendants of Issachar, Paltiel the son of Azan. The chieftain for the tribe of the descendants of Asher, Achihud the son of Shelomi. The chieftain of the tribe of the descendants of Naphtali, Pedachel the son of Amihud. These are the ones whom the Lord commanded to apportion the inheritance to the children of Israel in the land of Canaan. Chapter 35, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, Command the children of Israel that they shall give to the Levites from their hereditary possessions cities in which to dwell, and you shall give the Levites open spaces around the cities. These cities shall be theirs for dwelling, and their open spaces shall be for their cattle, their property, and for all their needs. The areas of open space for the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall extend from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits all around. You shall measure from the outside of the city 2,000 cubits on the eastern side, 2,000 cubits on the southern side, 2,000 cubits on the western side, and 2,000 cubits on the northern side. With the city in the middle, this shall be your city's open spaces. Among the cities you shall give to the Levites shall be 6 cities of refuge, which you shall provide as places to which a murderer can flee. In addition to them you shall provide 42 cities. All the cities you shall give to the Levites shall number 48 cities, with their open spaces. And as for the cities you shall give from the possession of the children of Israel, you shall take more from a larger holding, and you shall take less from a smaller one. Each one according to the inheritance allotted to him shall give of his cities to the Levites. All right, end of the sixth portion. A very short one, relatively. So here we have first a breakdown. Moses is being told that the men who will inherit the land on your behalf, in other words, your successors, right? So if Moses and Aaron were the leaders through the desert, the followers in their footsteps will be Eleazar the Cohen and Joshua the son of Nun. And then one chieftain from each tribe will be put in charge, and we get their names. The one of particular note for Judah, Caleb the son of Jephunneh, and then all the rest would be from the next generation. So then that's how they're going to do it. When they are apportioning the inheritance, it's going to be with these guys in tow. Now, beyond that, we're going to take a look in the next portion here, talking about the Levites receiving cities to dwell within the borders of the different tribes. So remember, the portion for the different tribes, other than the tribe of Levi, shall be within these cities. So they will never have land of their own per se. Instead, they're going to have within the land of their fellow tribes a section to live in, depending on the size of the tribe that is their host. So again, let's go to the tribe of Judah. It is the biggest one, right? So they're going to have the most land. They're also going to be responsible for giving the majority compared to their fellow tribes. They're going to have more cities for the Levites that they have to sequester for them. And then on top of that, it's going to be 6 cities of refuge, where we're going to learn more about what that is in a moment. But basically, a person who's a murderer can flee to these cities and be allowed to live safely within those cities, as again, we'll discuss shortly in the next portion. So moving on from there, what we're going to hear is going to be about the size of these cities. It basically says that they're going to be, with 48 total cities, 1,000 cubits, right, outward, up to 2,000 for the space. It was a little bit confusing in how they were describing it. So basically what it says is from the outside of the city, 2,000 cubits on the east, 2,000 on the south, 2,000 on the west, and 2,000 on the north. And the city will be in the middle, right? And so basically what it seems to me is almost like, for clarity, the diameter or the radius of these cities and the land that's around them, that's supposed to be like the open space, is going to be 2,000. So it's 1,000 paces or 1,000 cubits from the dead center of the city to get to the edge of the city, then another 1,000 to go to the edge of the open space. And so from outside the city, 2,000 cubits on each side. I mean, I'm not 100% because it gets a little bit confusing in how they're saying that. So does this mean that the total is actually 3,000 cubits or just 2,000 cubits, right? The first 1,000 are the city itself, and then another 1,000 from the walls or from the outside space to the edge. I'm not 100% sure, but the point is we're going to be seeing at least 1,000 cubits worth of open space that they can have their cattle and their belongings outside of the city walls. The specifics, again, we can break it down if we keep reading into it. I'm going to keep going, though, because I think you get the idea. So now on to the 7th and final portion, chapter 35, verse 9. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you cross the Jordan to the land of Canaan, you shall designate cities for yourselves. They shall be cities of refuge for you, and a murderer who killed a person unintentionally shall flee there. These cities shall serve you as a refuge from an avenger, so that the murderer shall not die until he stands in judgment before the congregation. The cities that you provide shall serve as 6 cities of refuge for you. You shall provide the 3 cities in Transjordan, and the 3 cities in the land of Canaan. They shall be the cities of refuge. These cities shall be a refuge for the children of Israel, and for the proselyte and resident among them, so that anyone who unintentionally kills a person can flee there. If he struck him with an iron instrument and he dies, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall be put to death. If he struck him with a fist-sized stone which is deadly, and he dies, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall be put to death. Or with a fist-sized wooden instrument which is deadly, and he dies, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall be put to death. The blood avenger shall kill the murderer. He may kill him when he meets him. If out of hatred he pushed him or threw something at him with premeditation and he died, or if he maliciously struck him with his hand and he died, the assailant shall be put to death. He is a murderer. The blood avenger may kill the murderer when he meets him. But if he pushed him accidentally without malice, or threw an object at him without premeditation, or with any stone which is deadly, and without seeing his victim he threw it down at him and killed him, but he was not his enemy and bore him no malice, then the congregation shall judge between the assailant and the blood avenger on the basis of these judgments. The congregation shall protect the murderer from the hand of the blood avenger, and the congregation shall return him to the city of refuge to which he had fled, and he shall remain there until the Kohen Gadol, who anointed him with the sacred oil, dies. But if a murderer goes beyond the border of the city of refuge to which he had fled, and the blood avenger finds him outside of the limits of his city of refuge, and the blood avenger slays the murderer, he has no blood. For he shall remain in his city of refuge until the Kohen Gadol dies, and only after the Kohen Gadol has died may the murderer return to the land which is his possession. These shall be for you a statute of justice for all your generations in all your dwelling places. Whoever, namely the blood avenger, kills a person, based on the testimony of witnesses, he shall slay the murderer. A single witness may not testify against a person so that he should die. You shall not accept ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death. He shall be put to death. You shall not accept ransom for one who has fled to his city of refuge to allow him to return to live in the land before the Kohen has died. And you shall not corrupt the land in which you live, for the blood corrupts the land, and the blood which is shed in the land cannot be atoned for except through the blood of the one who shed it. And you shall not defile the land where you reside, in which I dwell, for I am the Lord, who dwells among the children of Israel. Chapter 36, verse 1. The paternal heads of the family of the sons of Gilead, the sons of Machir, the sons of Manasseh, the families of the sons of Joseph, approached and spoke before Moses and before the chieftains, the paternal heads of the children of Israel. They said, "The Lord commanded my master to give the land as an inheritance through lot to the children of Israel. And our master was commanded by the Lord to give inheritance of Zelophehad, our brother, to his daughters. Now if they marry a member of another tribe of the children of Israel, their inheritance will be diminished from the inheritance of our father, and it will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry, and thus it will be diminished from the lot of our inheritance. Even if the children of Israel will have a jubilee, their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry, and their inheritance will be diminished from the inheritance of our father's tribe." Moses commanded the children of Israel according to the word of the Lord, saying, "The tribe of Joseph's descendants speak justly. This is the word that the Lord has commanded regarding Zelophehad's daughters. Let them marry whomever they please, but they shall marry only to the family of their father's tribe. Thus the inheritance of the children of Israel will not be transferred from tribe to tribe, for each person from the children of Israel will remain attached to the inheritance of his father's tribe. Every daughter from the tribes of Israel who inherits property shall marry a member of her father's tribe, so each one of the children of Israel shall inherit the property of his forefathers. And no inheritance will be transferred from one tribe to another tribe, for each person of the tribes of the children of Israel shall remain attached to his own inheritance. As the Lord had commanded Moses, so did Zelophehad's daughters do. Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noach married their cousins. They married into the families of the sons of Manasseh, the sons of Joseph, and their inheritance remained with the tribe of their father's family. These are the commandments and the ordinances that the Lord commanded the children of Israel through Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. All right, that is the end of the 7th portion. So quickly, we once again get a little bit more clarity on the refuge cities. So earlier it was mentioned that the Levites would receive cities. Now we learn about these refuge cities. So these 6 cities, they function as a safe haven for people who commit a murder, but specifically one who does so unintentionally. So it's like this. Murder is a pretty serious crime. So serious that if you commit murder, you are put to death. There's simply no negotiating here. Unless it was accidental. In other words, manslaughter. So if a person intentionally hits someone maliciously or with hatred in their heart, and it causes him to die, whether he did it by hitting him with a metal instrument or a stone or wooden instrument, or even with his fists, and he kills a person, he's a murderer. And so because it was premeditated especially, or not, but he did it with malice, he's guilty of the murder. So the blood avenger is basically somebody who survives from that person's family and wants that guy's head. So they say, you killed my brother, I'm going to get even with you. I'm going to kill you. And he's allowed to do that. That's actually completely fine. So the case here is, even if it's manslaughter, the avenger is allowed to take revenge, unless this person flees to one of these sanctuary cities. in these sanctuary cities, they will be allowed to stay there in safety and not be avenged until the head of the Kohen in that city dies, right? So the Kohen Gadol of that city, or even the main Kohen Gadol of the entire nation, the point is the Kohen Gadol, if there's only one, when he dies, only then may the manslaughterer return to his normal home. But if he's outside of one of these sanctuary cities before this time period, he can be murdered and there's no consequences to the guy who did it. In other words, if a person gets revenge for their fallen loved one, there's no punishment. But that is the requirement for manslaughter. If you want to stay alive, you can stay in the city. But when it's time for you to go to trial, one, if you're found guilty of murder with actual intent and not manslaughter, that's the death penalty. Simple as. And if you're allowed to live, then the land itself is going to basically get revenge because that's unpermissible. You cannot have a murderer of real murder, not manslaughter, but like actual intentional murder. They are not allowed to reside in the land. They got to be killed because it's going to be blood for blood. And if it's not that person's blood spilled, then the whole people are going to pay for it because God will not stomach or allow this to persist in his dwelling land. Now, from here, this is a matter of justice. It says a ransom shall not be paid, right? So in other words, you cannot buy his freedom. You can't say, "Oh, well, you killed him. Let me give you some money and we let this whole thing go away." Not allowed. Nor can you use that to change the ruling in the court. And if there are witnesses called forth, nobody can be put to death without at least 2 witnesses, right? It says with just 1 witness, you can't do it. So it has to have at least 2 witnesses to have a death penalty trial. No one shall be put to death when there's only 1 witness to testify. So that hopefully clarifies it. Some examples of the manslaughter is if, let's say, the guy, knocks his buddy over on accident or, without any intention of killing him and the guy accidentally dies, that's an accident. Or let's say he's holding a rock, like maybe you're on your roof, right? You're fixing your roof and you've got this like tool on the roof and you're about to come off of the roof. So I got this hammer I've been using. Let me, I don't want to carry the hammer down the ladder. Let me just drop it off the side of the house and then come down. Well, by accident, when you dropped your hammer onto the ground, thinking you were just putting it down, unfortunately, somebody happened to be walking right next to your house when this happened, and your hammer hits him in the head and kills him. This is an example of unintentional manslaughter where you drop something on somebody and it kills them, right? So, just a simple accident versus if you're up there with a hammer looking for someone to throw it at, that would be intentional. So this is unintentional manslaughter. And consequently, those people are allowed to survive, but they also are not safe from getting revenged upon. So they have to stay in the sanctuary city, and it's the responsibility of the congregation to protect that person from the one who would get revenge. And he's going to stay there. So but basically, there's going to be a trial, right? But the congregation will not allow this person to be killed by the blood avenger because he has to be held to trial. It has to be done correctly. And the Kohen Gadol who anointed him with the sacred oil dies, right? So, this is a kind of significant deal, right? Because the judgment has to be made. So when you get judged as an accidental murderer, right, the Kohen Gadol is going to seal the deal on that. Say, like, this is the official verdict. So allow him to be anointed. He'll live among the Levites in this sanctuary city. And then only after the Kohen Gadol who did the anointing has died will he be free to return to his homeland where he was originally living. But if he leaves beyond those borders, open season. And it says he has no blood. If the avenger kills him, it means he's allowed to, right? But he will remain in the sanctuary city, and then only when the Kohen Gadol dies can he return to the land which was his possession. So in other words, return to your family plot after the guy who anointed you dies. So if you're going to be stuck in that sanctuary city, like and you do want to go home, you better hope that the Kohen Gadol is older rather than one that just got appointed. Otherwise, you're going to be there for a long time. But anyway, that is that. Now let's go ahead and move along to the next section. Chapter 36. So here we have a discussion. The different sons of Gilead, the son of Manasseh, descendant, right, and the sons of Joseph approach before Moses, and they have a problem. And they say, hey, remember in the previous Torah portion how the daughters of Zelophehad inherited his property? So if they marry anybody from another tribe, our tribe, Menashe, is going to have less land because their new husband is going to inherit what they got from our land. So we don't want that to happen. What do we do? And so Moses says, well, the Lord has said that you children of Joseph have spoken justly. So here's the deal. The daughters of that fallen brother of yours who inherited the land because they had no male siblings, they will be allowed to get married, but only to somebody from their tribe. This way, even though their new husband will inherit what they inherited, it'll stay within the tribe itself. Therefore, it's not a problem. And let this be the permanent statute for all the tribes. Women who inherit their father's inheritance will not marry outside of their own tribe, thus preventing the allotment of inheritance from being taken by their new spouse from another tribe. So in other words, if you're from the tribe of Reuben or the tribe, well, I shouldn't say that because they're the ones who are outside, right? But let's say if you're from the tribe of Menashe and you've got a daughter who inherits everything from you, and then she marries someone from the tribe of Benjamin, the guy from the tribe of Benjamin would have inherited all the property, but in this case, this is now forbidden. She can only marry somebody from the tribe of Menashe, thus preventing the land from being distributed amongst the 12 tribes again. So this is confirmed with these daughters. They all marry within the sons of Menashe, and thus their inheritance remains within the Menashe tribe. Thus are the commandments and ordinances given to Moses by the Lord to command the people of Israel in the plains of Moab. And with that, we have concluded the double portion. Woo! That was a long one. For this week's Weekly Parashahcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found that educational. I found it quite educational and a little exhausting. There's so much material, but that's what you get for a double reading. In any case, now we've seen a whole lot of material, and we really get the impression that Moses is really wrapping things up. He is on a fast track to concluding his tenure as the leader of the children of Israel, and his time is running out, and we know that time is coming soon. But in any case, this has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it educational, entertaining, and otherwise, and I hope you'll tune in next time. Until then, once again, Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast signing off, and as always, let us say, Baruch Hashem.